I wasted roughly 45 minutes on a machine that couldn't drive this no matter how long I left them in there. So I put them in another machine, and about a half hour later they were good to go. But that was my experience at the laundromat yesterday. On a more serious note, well, I'll get to that in just a moment. On some previous episodes, I was lamenting about some of the possible candidates for the Hall of Famous Missourians here in the Show Me State in Jefferson City, and some of the choices that were being made, like Rush Limbaugh was a prominent candidate. Of course, he got that bust of him in the Capitol Rotunda last year. Well, now there is a new list of famous Missourians being considered to be honored this year. And one of them is a prominent figure in Kirksville's history. As a matter of fact, one of my great-grandfathers or great-uncles, I can't remember which. I have to check with my mom on this. But I know there's a relative, I think it was a great-great-uncle, or probably a great-great or great-great-great-great-uncle, who was a student of this man that I'm about to tell you about, A.T. Still. Now, outside of Kirksville, most people probably have never heard of him. Well, he is the father of osteopathic medicine. Andrew Taylor Still, A.T. Still for short. He's medical doctor, D.O. And he rebelled against the standard 19th century medicinal practices. Okay? About 2 centuries ago, toward the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, he offered a new philosophy that brought heavy resistance, forcing his rivals to fight against it, or so they chose. Now, according to Eric Snyder, D.O. and associate professor at ATSU, Dr. Still profoundly changed the course of medicine in the United States of America. Snyder used to be a librarian at West Virginia's School of Osteopathic Medicine. He credits Dr. A.T. Still for changing his career path. Dr. Still was quite a pioneer. He created this entire profession of osteopathic medicine. Had he not written his book, I probably never would have come across them to read them and change my career. Now, he was a forward thinker ahead of his time. That's according to Deborah Loguda Summers, curator of the Museum of Osteopathic Medicine and International Center for Osteopathic History. When the school opened, women and minorities were invited to come. That is something Loguda Summers said was an unusual practice during Still's era. Dr. Still lived in Macon, Missouri, and later moved to Kirksville, where he founded the world's first osteopathic medicinal school in 1892. Okay? And now called A.T. Still University. Just recently, he made the top 10 list of candidates for the induction into the Hall of Famous Missourians, where he received the second most nominations. Very impressive. From the time that he wrote those books, it has had a profound impact on our country, and now there are people all over the world that are learning about osteopathy and osteopathic medicine. And if you'd like to cast your vote to share Dr. Andrew Taylor Still's legacy permanently at the Missouri State Capitol, I have a website for you to give you a little time to open up your address bar or to get pen and paper to jot this down. I know that's so 20th century, but give you time to jot this down. And I've forgotten who else was on that list. Of course, I'm voting for A.T. Still because he's had an impact on all our lives, whether directly or indirectly. So that's one of the reasons why I chose him. And also, he has a local connection. Okay, ready? The website is tinyurl.com vote for Still. Now, 4 is the number 4. tinyurl.com/vote for Still. Okay? And encourage you to vote as soon as possible. Now, on to more serious matters. I'll get to the latest on the government shutdown and the Affordable Care Act to date in just a moment. Last Friday, I told you a story about an associate of mine, an acquaintance from college, who cussed me out on Facebook last Thursday because he didn't like my opinions. And, well, on Monday, another friend of mine from college, a closer friend, or so I thought, although we haven't talked much in the last 2 or 3 years, wrote a comment on my Facebook page after I commented about Americans who need health care now can't wait another year, regardless of your political stance. Now, to me, it was not intended to be a political statement. It was a statement of fact that regardless of your political affiliations or ideologies, that we're in a pickle here, and the government, in its infinite stupidity, decides to cater to its own ego rather than the will of the people, and decided to shut down. Well, this friend of mine, and we were friends since my junior year of college, which was in 92, 93. We met in the spring of 93. As a matter of fact, we became like brothers for a while. He was a roommate when I first moved out of my parents' home, and we were roommates for about a year and spent a lot of time together with each other's family, primarily mine with his family. Well, the other day I made that comment about health care, and all Americans need health care, especially the low income. Well, he basically stated that, well, if you need health care, go out and get a job. Well, that may be true for about 85% of the people that are on the public dole, that there are some out there that probably could work. But what about if you're in a position where you can't work? Well, maybe I shouldn't have said 85%. Well, anyway, I imagine he hasn't liked a lot of my opinions lately. We've had disparaging, I'm sure, even though we've never talked about it directly, our political and religious ideologies have gone very different directions. He's gone more extremely conservative. I've gone extremely liberal, which I find ironic because about 17 years ago, when Bob Dole was running for president on the Republican ticket and Clinton was running on the Democratic side, I defended Bob Dole. I thought he was a better candidate. And at the time, I thought that he would have made a better president. I was wrong. And I remember back then there was comments about Bob Dole's age, and that maybe it was going to be a hindrance if he were to become elected president, and that should be a reason why we shouldn't elect him. Real political differences aside, I thought that was a stupid argument. But then I made the same comment about John McCain 12 years later. Well, this friend and I, we haven't talked much in recent years. Our lives have gone different directions. And I feared that would happen once he moved to the St. Louis area. But that's the nature of friendship. Well, last night I got curious, and I was hoping, well, maybe I should have said more to him. Said it's good to hear from you again, but I didn't, because I was so taken aback by his callous comment. Because there are people in my life who are mentally able to hold a job, that could hold a job if they had to. But for physical reasons, just even sitting all day is as detrimental as standing all day. And I don't know if he's fully aware of that or remembered it. Well, last night I got curious about this friend, and I decided to look him up. Maybe I thought, well, it's time to offer an olive branch and talk to him. So I clicked on his, so I went through my address book to look him up. And I saw on the friends button, add friend. That add friend button, I thought, he deleted me. He deleted me. And I thought, well, forget this. I'm not going to offer an olive branch now. And I'm sorry. Those of you that know me, know and have listened to the last few episodes, know that once you walk out of my life, I'm not as comfortable about letting you back in. I have strong trust issues. Because in my experience, it's once you walk out, maybe it's best not to let you back in. The only exception I ever made was with my dad. I don't think I'll ever do that for anyone else. Now, if it's a genuine disagreement, a mutual departure, and I'm not saying I'm totally resistant to letting someone else back into my life, but in my experience, I've found that when someone walks out of your life, it's probably best to just let them go for whatever reason and not try to figure out why. And Jason, I'm sorry that it has to be this way, that you feel like you can't handle my opinions or the fact that we just don't agree. But that's the way life is. And it's hard for me to accept because another friend of mine made the observation a few years ago that I care too much, and perhaps I do. But there also comes a time when you just have to let go, even if you don't want to. Friendships are always in a state of flux, and if you don't spend time cultivating them or finding a peaceful ground, then maybe that friendship was never meant to be for long periods of time. And it reminded me of one of my favorite moments in Star Trek: The Next Generation. I quote Star Trek episodes like some people quote Bible verses, but the episode was called Legacy. And the premise of the episode was Tasha Yar's sister. Tasha Yar used to be Chief of Security of the Enterprise in the first season of The Next Generation. Well, her character was killed off toward the end of that season so that Denise Crosby could continue on her movie career. That was that was a mistake. But anyway, Tasha Yar's sister comes on board, and gradually she earns the trust of some members of the crew, in particular Data, who was, of course, intimate with Tasha Yar at one point, and were really good friends. Well, toward the end of the episode, Tasha Yar's sister, I can't remember her name now, her character's name, but anyway, she betrayed Data and Riker in a raid on this planet that she and Tasha were from. And the sister ends up staying behind on this planet, and toward the end of the episode, Data is perplexed by what has just happened, so he goes to Commander Riker, and they start talking about trust and friendship and loyalty and so forth. And Data goes, Riker convinces Data to believe that in all trust there is the possibility of betrayal. I'm not sure that you were prepared for that. And then Data asked, are any of you prepared for that? And then Riker goes, that's just part of it, basically. And every time you get to know someone, you take that chance that they're going to walk out. And that's what I've been facing for the past 12 to 14 hours after I learned what happened yesterday. But anyway, get off that soapbox and get on to the meat and potatoes of today's program. And I'm sure you're sick of hearing about it, but I'm going to offer some things I want you to think about. The Affordable Care Act, and more in particular, the government shutdown. I still don't get the GOP strategy on this. Now, I'm not saying the GOP is entirely at fault. Democrats are as much to blame. As a matter of fact, I think the president exacerbated the problem in the last 2 days alone by basically egging on the Republicans and saying, we won't compromise either. Well, I agree. There's a time to stand to your principles, and there's also a time to compromise. And it's a tenet of Vulcan philosophy. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. In this case, the American people, the needs and the will of the American people should take precedent. In this case, the federal workers that are now getting screwed out of a paycheck at this very moment. At the same time, the Republicans are doing everything they can to derail the Affordable Care Act. Well, whether you call it a law or a tax, it is a law. A tax is a law. And unless you want to face penalties, you have to comply with that law. Well, it seems that the Republicans wouldn't concede to anything on Monday. The Democrats were unwilling to compromise as well. So it's lights out. Debt ceiling fight is next, and since they didn't get anything out of Monday's stalemate, I'm talking about the Republicans, by the way, they'll put up the same demands again. So even